Okay, so basically to start off with, this is, the first episode of Fast, Loud, and Rude. Thank you,
Oh yeah.
Tom, for the name. And I just wanted to start off with who you guys are, what roles you play in the band.
My name is Thomas Brower. I started the band in 2018. I do guitars and vocals, and then we also have Ian Engelman, who's not able to join us. He's a drummer, full-time drummer, percussion. And then we have Zach, who's the bass player, also vocals, and then Tyler, lead guitars, and also vocals as well.
Cool, cool. And how did the band get started, and how did you guys end up forming this lineup? Because when I first became aware of you guys, you had a very unstable lineup. There was a lot of different people in the mix. So how did it get to here, and where did it start from?
So it kind of started with I guess myself is kind of like starting with the music, and kind of the sound that I was going for. And then I found, some good musicians that could play, and they could play shows. And we were tight and everything. And we had the fire, if you will, the drive there in the beginning with that first EP that came out. Just kind of learning as I go type of style. I wrote some of the lyrics when I was in high school, a few of them, and then I didn't really get like the band or the recordings started until later. I had the riffs there and everything, the makings of it there, and then just kind of putting it down, laying down the tracks and laying down the songs. And then I worked with like a producer who also played drums, Mike
Oh,
Mike
okay.
Smith, and yeah, he was also like a drum teacher instructor here in Battleground. Um,
And was this like
and so then I
pre-COVID, or
worked with
was this in
him.
like the last couple years?
It was
This
a
is
couple years
pre-COVID. This
before
is probably
COVID.
like back, yeah, it's like back in like 2017 to 2019, that period.
Oh, okay,
Of,
so a while ago then.
but, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then from there, I guess uh, I met Zach and Tyler, and then later down the line, meeting Ian was like definitely awesome. He's a kick-ass drummer, very tight, and uh, from there, this meeting, like Disciples of Darkness kind of ensued as a kind of a follow-up to the EP, and yeah, we had the pandemic that happened, and that kind of like I guess as a songwriter, kind of like allowed me time to kind of really dial in those songs and get a kind of a really good lineup established that we had at the time with Joel, of course, and then from there, Cyber Darkness was released in 2022, and then from there, me and Watson, and then playing shows like out in Boise, Idaho, with like Warbringer and Heathen. Slowly started kind of spreading the fire, if you will, in the
Yeah.
Northwest for Atomic Terror, and yeah, we've kind of played this whole region up here and with these songs, and then now finally having this established lineup for the last 2.5 years now almost, and the songs like on this new record are definitely very evolved in our songwriting, our
For
approach
sure.
to it. It feels a lot more like we're like a team. It's more like a team, which is very beautiful when
Right.
people working together.
And that's really happened, it seems, since Zach and Tyler joined. And Zach and Tyler, how did you guys end up joining the band?
So
Oh,
we have met Tom back at his first show at the I believe it was the Heavy Metal Brewery back in Vancouver,
yep.
and um, back then Chris Furlong, who was lead guitarist at the time, we talked with him saying, "Hey, do you know any bands that would like to co-host our first show?" And back then me and Tyler were in a band called Unfit to Rest, and we've been great buddies since. And they Atomic Terror helped us out with a few bands shows here and there throughout 2022, and it got to a point where the band Unfit to Rest was just not working, at least the way a couple of us had intended to. And so um we eventually, both me and Tyler, ended up like just slowly joining Atomic Terror, and it's been fun since.
Oh, very cool. That sounds really organic. Like it just kind of happened that way.
Yeah.
Yep. Like, and of course, Zach, he also forwarded me the like basically a message, like I think it was an email from Thomas himself, but like saying like, oh, we need another guitarist. So I was thinking like, well, I guess I better jump on this as quickly as I can because guitarists, when it's a very competitive thing. Like there are more guitarists. Finding a good one's like a dime a dozen, whereas like finding a good drummer is like kind of rare. Like
Yeah.
Yes.
especially a drummer already not in like 12 bands or something. So
I remember in the because I did get that same email. I think I was asked to do lead guitar first, and at the time I was a little unsure about doing it, not because I didn't want to do it, but it's just I don't know, it's just uh in my mind I'm more of a studio guitarist than I am an actual, like, I guess how some people would put it, like live shredder. So it's just I just didn't feel confident living up to that particular role, and so I ended up telling Tyler about it, and he was in on it.
Sure, that makes sense to me. Um, so for each of you guys individually, how did you end up becoming fans of this style of music? What's your story with heavy metal music in general?
Tom, you want to start first?
Sure. So I guess I started off kind of listening to it at a kind of a young age, I guess. Um, with growing up with bands like Iron Maiden and Van Halen, Kiss, and then kind of listening to those rock and roll records, and then kind of from there, funny bands like Metallica. Like Kill 'Em All was like my first album that I had when I was like around the age of 10 or 11, and
Dang, that's a good way to
I
start.
remember just like listening to that on my headphones. Just kind of like I just love that, like that raw energy and that sound. It just was like blew me away. And I songs like Seek and Destroy was definitely pretty cool. Also, but then you kind of get more as you grow with these albums. You kind of they stand the test of time. Like I mean, further along with Metallica, you got Red Lightning, Master of Puppets, of course, and and then I guess and then listening to like Iron Maiden, and like I guess growing up like with like stuff like Star Wars and like that kind of lore of like He-Man, you Masters of the Universe, that kind of stuff. There's kind of like that dark and light side of the story, if you will. And I kind of paired that with metal almost a little bit at a young age, just by the sound of some bands sounding more, this way of some bands sounding more, a little bit more.
Yeah, that makes a lot
The
of
imagery is
sense.
always,
Yeah, that dark imagery combined with the music, it's just such a natural pairing.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
And then I kind of slowly over time, I guess, like, learning to play guitar myself. She started like learning, like Breaking the Law, that kind of like guitar riff, and then Black Sabbath, that song. And then
Mm-hmm.
then at the time, my brother and I was doing vocals, and I was doing guitar, and we were just kind of jamming on stuff, and and then and then slowly started learning more by like writing songs, and then it kind of became like almost an addiction, like an escape. Like the guitar, every time I saw it, I just wanted to play it, and it just became kind of like a thing where I just became very passionate, obsessed, if you will, about playing, and it kind of like became this whole like realm that I could escape to, or if you will, for music, have this voice that I felt like I didn't really have, I guess, in some areas.
No, that's
So I
super
feel like
cool. That makes a lot of
music just
sense
kind
to
of get
me.
yeah, and then also you kind of find other people have the same kind of feeling, and that you kind of have that common ground that people, and it kind of creates more of a movement with the music as well.
And how
Which
about you,
you
Tyler?
kind of look back and like, and
But yeah. So
I was just
I started around
go ahead.
the same age, like about 10. Of course, though, there's a lot of context, So, growing up as a child, I think most metalheads relate to this. That I've kind of felt like an outcast in many ways, and then I first heard Black Sabbath, so I heard like the very first band, that's considered the first metal band. That became a gateway drug for me, like, and so expressing like many of the same issues that I felt at the same time. And then, from there, I discovered Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, some Metallica. But then I, immediately went to the heavier, darker sides of that. I explored like some of the, bands like Bathory and even like heavier ones like Venom, and I fell in love ever since. And it wasn't even just the music, but it was the fact that I found more people that enjoyed that, and that kind of weirdly became like the basis, you know, the foundation of many of these, which usually you don't want to base anything, like that, so something superficial. But as kids, we got closer over time, for other means as well. But it was a common interest in that, and it was sort of us like kind of having each other's backs, feeling like outcasts. It kind of helped us only to realize it's like, well, my situation wasn't unique to just myself. It was like many other people, and I think heavy metals kind of allowed me that perspective to find community, but also, well, through it, the eccentricity, as well as having a kind of a sense of questioning, authority in a multitude. I'm not saying that I, derived much of my identity from heavy metal. It's more so that heavy metal sort of guided my hand in finding that, if so to speak. And yeah, at around 10, I also started playing guitar. Went through a lot of the hurdles, that are associated with learning to play and whatnot. And then, and I heard Iron Maiden around like, what was I, 12, 13. And from there, that's when I actually started like, desiring to learn guitar in a, in a, like in an earnestly, to, to actually like get serious, to actually get good at my instrument, because I think it was mainly like Adrian Smith, his guitar work, Dave Murray, yeah, even some Yannick Gers too. It also kind of showed me how like simple, but also like how like such a simple songwriting, like you know, can actually take you so far. Which I never initially was like, the metal when I was a kid. I mainly listened to like R&B, but also like the Beatles and whatnot, but I don't think we'd have heavy metal if it weren't for like, R&B and blues and jazz, and especially rock and roll, which those
The
are all
blues.
products of black culture anyhow. But yeah, that's kind of how I became like kind of into heavy metal. It kind of happened almost on accident in a way, but it had I had those same emotions that many metal musicians and metalheads, at the time had, and so that resonated with me, and so it just kind of it was like a big black storm that you initially don't want to be in, but then like it swoops you up, and you're like, actually, I love this.
Man, that's really well said.
Oh, thank you.
Zach, anything for you, man?
So I started consciously like listening to music. I want to say it around like 8 or 9, and a majority of that was primarily from my favorite video games at the time. So Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1, I love that soundtrack to death. And finding out over time some of the artists that got featured on there. So like Dead Kennedys, suicidal tendencies, and so at that time I wasn't quite listening to metal yet, but I was like, it's got that same vibe that I hear in other heavy metal acts. And eventually I think I want to say 2009 my dad got me Guitar Hero Metallica for Christmas, so I was playing the shit out of those songs like crazy, and like feeling the energy of them and stuff. Um and some of the other songs that I guess were featured um as well, like majority of them that helped influence Metallica over time, not just the early songs, but the people they've got to tour with. And so um, I was getting into it so much. I asked my dad for a guitar so long, and I I think it took me a year of just saving a bunch of pennies just to get a shitty $69 guitar at the age of 12. And I wasn't initially playing heavy metal yet. It's like, had to learn the basics. So a lot of, like I mentioned, Dead Kennedys, but also Blink 182, Green Day. And once I figured out how to play those songs, because I did get sick and tired of playing them. And so it eventually evolved into Metallica songs, not just that, but a little bit of some of the more modern stuff like White Stripes, Linkin Park, um, and a little bit of Black Sabbath here and there too. And some of the more modern metal acts, once I started getting more involved in music throughout high school. So Bullet for My Valentine, All That Remains, Of Mice and Men. I still like to listen to them to this day.
All that
Uh,
scene stuff, man.
yeah. And some of the more recent stuff that I've been listening to as well. Some old school bands from the 90s, like In Flames. Heck, even old school what was that band that did Heartwork? Carcass.
Oh
And
yeah,
some Death Clock. I'm currently wearing their
there you go.
Death Clock shirt right
Yeah.
now. Just saw them last weekend.
So,
So and a lot of what got me into heavy metal was that pure like raw energy, especially those bands from the 90s, even like some of the bands I started listening to from 2010s. Um and so like over time I just grew away from some of the stuff my folks were listening to, because I didn't feel that same passion. And I'm sure that a lot of very great artists on the radio can still put out their heart and soul into it, but it's just when it came to those bands, I was feeling it a lot more. And even to this day I still feel like that energetic wild child that you hear that on those metal records. It's just I just don't hear it in a lot of modern music today. But so
Yeah, I mean, modern music, it doesn't even matter the genre, is so financialized for the stuff that's actually getting at radio play. I mean, they're even thinking about how do we cut down on costs to record. Like, so you're totally right. It doesn't matter what music from that time. It had way more passion in it than what's been going on today. Unless it's underground stuff from today, is what I'm trying to say.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah.
Well, awesome.
Yeah, that
Go ahead, Tom.
yeah, I was gonna say yeah that is true. I mean, if you think back in like throughout history of the last century, the 1900s, you have kind of like movements of music with history in a sense, and you think about there's a sound of like the 50s, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then like you get to a point where now it's kind of there isn't really like a mainstream anymore, and I mean, good music is always just good music. It can't change. It just doesn't change. It's something that's just pure and good, and it's like and so when you have that kind of trueness in the music, that's where you create good stuff. Stuff that lasts the test of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so next question I have for you guys is I want to start talking about the new album, Cloak of Deception. And I just want to hit on a couple things that are like things that stood out to me. Rose Red is a really interesting track for you guys. It's really different than what you guys have done before.
Uh,
What
we,
was the process with writing that, and how was that experience for you, doing something that was so, different?
Cool.
that one, it's actually we changed the name of it from Rose Red to Creep Show now.
Okay.
It will be on the album, but
Oh,
we kept it as I mean, Rose Red all the way up to this point. But uh, it kind of started as kind of like a jazz kind of like kind of inspiration, but also kind of like a horror. Like I'm a huge like horror kind of sci-fi fan, so I was kind of trying to create this kind of imagery through like because instrumental songs are different than just songs. They're more like a painting, if you will, or where you're kind of creating this color of this imagery to the listener, and so it kind of has a like kind of like creepy kind of intro, and then but then also I mean Tyler has a very awesome lead guitar work over
oh,
that
thanks.
kind of gives that voicing that care like it kind of gives that voicing and that elaborate detail that the song calls for. And
Oh yeah.
then I like that kind of like kind of entranced, kind of like ghostly chord progression at the end, where kind of like because like I was kind of create this image of someone being like lured into this kind of like question of like the paranormal, or like kind of that kind of idea, or like kind of someone walking into some place they don't intend to, or walking into um you know this kind of like haunted kind of place that they didn't think existed, if you will, and then now they're kind of like entranced into this state, you know, to the
Absolutely.
end.
And that's definitely how I felt about it was it had a very trance-like kind of feeling to it. Um, it's just so different than what you guys have done with a lot of your stuff. I think that's what really blew me away about it.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, like, I mean, kind of having that idea of like the horror genre is kind of plays a big part in atomic terror. I feel like that kind of like the contrary to the norm.
Yeah, and I noticed that with like Blood Rena as well. Um, Blood Rena, is that it?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
But
But
right now, yeah,
that song and yeah, there was another one earlier in that, but it almost had like a very like a first wave of black metal kind of feel to it.
Oh
And
yeah.
I felt like that was super unique and super cool. And it's something that I didn't hear that much on the first album. Um, is that something that just kind of like happened with this
Yeah.
one, or
Oh yeah.
Well, I feel like it was kind of accentuated a little bit on like Black Riders of Doom, songs like Black Riders of Doom, or Cyphers of Darkness. But I guess we amplified it like times 10, if you will, on this new album, where we kind of really dug deep into like kind of that like darkness, or if you will, or kind of feel, which kind of I feel like with the song like Blood Rain, which I initially kind of inspired by like the infamous Countess Bathory, and kind of how she was able to, I mean, how she got into this psychological mindset of like thirst for blood, and it kind of to kind of having that kind of that purity kind of aspect of it as well, and it kind of just that imagery of like blood and someone being like obsessed with it around them. I guess it's kind of the idea. And then also there's a show called The 100, which is kind of like a post-apocalyptic scenario after a nuclear war. And there's this character, Octavia Blake, and she's they're on this, so basically after the nuclear war they're orbiting the Earth in this kind of like space station, if you will, surviving. And then they send, it's been like 100 years or so since Earth was habitable, and so they send like 100 degenerate youth, like kids, down, like kind of to the Earth to see if it's what's going on. Eventually, they find that there is, life still left. There's just kind of these tribal kind of people, and there's this group of people that live off of the blood of the people that are able to withstand that radiation. And so, but then
that's
kind of
pretty
that, and then
metal?
also Octavia turned, yeah, yeah, and then Octavia basically, this is part where Earth kind of has this kind of supernova kind of effect that happens on the Earth that eliminates life once again, and then she kind of goes down with like her people, like a tribe of people, into this like hole in the Earth to survive. And while down there, like she kind of like becomes like Blood Reina, because she reigns with bloodshed, and she enforces order with like gladiator fights, and it's like, so they call her Blood Reina. And so then
Okay.
kind of that like she kind of had that lust for blood as well, just for vengeance, for what happened to her mother, who was killed by the kind of the elite status people on the space station, to like her so okay, and kind of that kind of female kind of fatale kind of attack, what we went for.
Yeah, no, that I think that's a really cool theme for the song. And I noticed a lot with the whole album, just a lot more trem sections than I noticed on Disciples of Darkness. And it especially came out to me um, on the title track on Cloak of Deception, where you have those trem runs that lead into the solos. And that to me was something really unique. You've got these really in your face trem runs and then Tyler solos and then kind of bouncing back to the vocal parts. What was that process like with writing that? I just thought that that was so neat.
Hmm.
Well, it kind of started off with writing that part, that kind of that was underneath the solos, and then we had the guitar melody kind of in mind, and then Tyler came up with kind of that like riff section that you hear in the bridge over the
Yeah.
vocals, kind of that melodic tremolo picking that kind of like almost worked well with leading into that like kind of that interlude part, and then I thought kind of worked well for like a vocal kind of dynamic as well.
Well, and that whole fast part is so interesting because the intro and outro riff is almost more like a Thin Lizzy kind of thing. And then
Uh,
when it picks up speed there, you guys have this speed riff that's very thrash, that the trem runs and the solos. And then what really blew me away is that fourth guitar solo. I That's one of the only ones that I don't know who that is. Cuz Tyler kind of has a style and Tom, you kind of have a style. Who plays that fourth solo on Cloak of Deception?
Well, that is Tyler.
yeah.
Okay,
Tyler does most of the solos on.
on the record. Yeah, that one really
Uh,
surprised me.
oh yeah. Like I was kind of I always try to think about like, whenever I craft solos, like what's the melody being played, what's the chord structure, and then also like, what the emotion of this section is. So what I try to do is like, if it's a very climactic section, then I try my absolute best to kind of fit that by like, maybe making it a bit more ferocious or, making it like, and sometimes I might use different techniques for that kind of stuff where I'm not as like technical as like many of the guitar players that are out and about nowadays, but I want to go like beyond, I guess like kind of the convention, the metal purist convention. I guess one of my biggest influences is Alex Lifeson, all as well as like, Adrian Smith, with a little bit of like David Gilmour. And I kind of think about like, you know, I don't try to think about like, what would Adrian Smith do? What would this guitarist do? I'm like, well, okay, what would I do? It's, I'm trying my best to kind of create my own individual style that kind of stands out from others, where it's maybe not be the most technical, but sometimes I kind of like it when guitarists have a bit of a rustic sound to them, so long as the idea can be conveyed, at least audibly.
Yeah, not overly polished.
Yep.
Yeah, and that one
Yeah,
really stood out to me just because of the use of the blues scale on it, and
Yep.
that felt really different from a lot of the other leads on the album. Um,
Yeah. Very kind of Jimmy Page-esque in a sort of a way.
yeah, exactly. Um, the other one, like another piece that really stood out to me was the song "At World's End," and
Yeah.
I think what was interesting about that too is like there's a couple parts with some real, singing in it. Who did the singing on the album?
Oh yeah, I did the cleans on that one.
that's
Okay.
Tyler.
Or
So,
actually, it was both. It was actually me and Zach too.
so what ended up happening was, you know, Tyler came down to record his clean parts for that song and another one. Um, I forgot which one it was, but during that, because I remember Tom was specifically asking for a vocal part at the same position that the guitar was going on, the
Yeah.
oh, and I told Tyler, hey, what if we threw in a choir part in there? And he was
Yeah.
totally on board on it, and
Oh
we
yeah, I
yeah
loved
we
it.
yeah and and it was only two of us. I think it was like
Yep.
two of us times six vocal tracks, and that was enough
Yeah.
for like a big sounding choir. We showed it to Tom, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we love that."
And then like the
Almost gave
Steven,
it like a Halo theme kind of thing. Like
yeah, the Gregorian kind of choir, sort of sound. And I also thought of like the harmony. Of course, I think I'm addicted to harmony, especially like guitar harmonies, which you could kind of tell with Cloak of Deception.
Oh
It's
yeah.
an addiction.
Yeah,
I need to go to rehab, maybe.
yeah. There
I
was
don't
one
know.
point
Yeah,
the harmony did go over my head on one song. It was Forgotten Realms, and he wanted to
Oh
add a
yeah.
harmony on there, and I told him like, there's no way we can make this harmony work in the bridge. But then I was like, well, wait a minute. Instead of a higher harmony, how about you do a darker, like lower harmony? And
Yeah, that was Zach's idea. And I was like, oh, that's even better. Like it's like I loved when I heard it. I was like the dissonance, like okay, well, that's saying that Atomic Terror's music, is like intentionally dissonant is like saying water is wet, but like I don't know, that dissonance was very neat and kind of stood out from like other works that we did previously, and I was like, oh, I love this.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes that
Yeah.
it gave it this like kind of discordant kind of feel and
Oh
gave
yeah,
it made it very creepy. I really liked that. And on Cloak of Deception too, I liked that you guys had a harmony with no rhythm guitar part behind it. And
Yeah, that dual that
I thought
yeah,
that
that
took
kind
a
of like
lot of I thought that took a lot of balls, you know? Like usually you got a guitar track behind kind of holding the riff together. And I
yeah.
really liked that you did it without that, that it was just the bass and the drums for the rhythm section and then the two guitars harmonizing. How'd you come up with that part? You know, what was the idea there?
I guess
uh,
kind of the
uh,
idea is that
so
Tom had it. Oh yeah, continue. Sorry.
Go
I was
ahead,
gonna
Tom.
say, I mean, I kind of wrote the song like kind of just. I mean, I kind of wrote that part like kind of as I listened to like death, scream, bloody gore, and like
Nice.
the song "Zombie Ritual."
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of jamming on that song before I wrote "Cloak of Deception" a little bit, and then but kind of like obviously it's a totally different song, but that part I was trying to create this kind of like almost Iron Maiden-ish kind
Yeah,
of like guitar part, and then I brought it to the guys, and we worked out what we hear on the record, and which became more, more like a good standing part that you can kind of almost like Detroit Rock City or something, where it's
yeah.
something you can sing to or hear,
Yeah, for
Yeah.
and
sure.
it kind of works well with.
Yeah, with that very Thin Lizzy like riff that you guys have going in the song, it definitely kind of it put those two parts together for me because you have that build up to the fast part, and then you have that harmony with no rhythm guitar, and then it comes back to that Thin Lizzy type riff, and I thought that that worked really well. I thought that's a really cool song. I totally
Oh,
get how that ended up being the title track because
mhm.
that's huge. Um, Another note I had was on At World's End and just kind of in general with you guys' material, you know, the apocalyptic theme to a lot of the music that you guys have made. Where does that come from, the fascination with that? Because I think that that's just so interesting.
I guess it comes from just kind of the idea of it's like not being. I guess like the end of all, like dying yourself is one thing, but leaving what you leave the world behind with is another thing. And I think that just the kind of leaving the world with like in total decay, and it's kind of like this contrary where like the world is a very beautiful place, and in a lot of ways, and just the earth gives life, but it's also very brutal at the same time. And so like the kind of that contrast of beauty and brutality is kind of the balance of nature, and so I feel like that with like being in control of mankind's hands, it's kind of like taking people's lives away, which is kind of like and I and that feel that kind of that injustice feeling where like you're not in control of your own life, I guess,
Right.
and it feels kind of like dehumanizing, if you will. And so like that's kind of where I like feel that almost like a caged animal, if you will, like. I guess like where if the animal could break out of the cage, like what would it do to its captors? I guess that's kind of where some of the songs, I guess, like drawing of kind of that like military control or like that kind of like tyrant tyranny kind of like idealism and like being under the thumb of like some kind of like government entity or and also beyond that, like beyond just what's on Earth, like throughout the whole universe, like questioning the world around us, which is, should be a human right to do.
Yeah, I mean, last night we had that Aurora Borealis, which is, a solar storm. And, if one of those was just a little too strong, it's a geomagnetic thing. It could wipe out the power and communications basically on Earth, and it's completely outside of our control. There's nothing we can do
Oh
about
yeah.
it.
So
And
that
so,
happened, I think,
Yeah.
like back in the 1800s. Like the whole all telegraphs were actually taken down, and it took months to repair.
yeah, I think it was in like 1859 or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, I,
Crazy.
I I read that too, Tyler. And yeah, it's something we just have no power over. So I totally
Yeah.
get, Tom, what you're saying about the fascination of like the powerlessness of the apocalypse. And then like also that we're powerless and yet it's humans doing it. And I think that that's a
Yeah.
fascinating theme.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because if you think about like, I just was gonna talk about like like the extinction kind of level events throughout history. Like the sixth extinction could be brought by our own hand, a lot of perhaps, or but I mean it's also kind of the laws of nature. Of course, there's powers that powers beyond comprehension.
so far, what's you guys' favorite gig that you've done as Atomic Terror together, just for this lineup?
Um,
So for me personally, it's always been the Dante shows, mainly because, it's like it's been that one location where, you go to any heavy metal show outside of Roseland Theater or even some of the um, other ones that like Memorial Coliseum. It's like if I wanted to see like something that was more local, it's a nice, fun venue to be at, and plus, I feel like everybody that comes to see us there really has a good time watching us.
This
Oh yeah.
guy.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Zach. Like many of the Dante's gigs are amazing. But of course, I think my first favorite's probably a bit of a dead giveaway for the other members. But yeah, this festival here, I bought this as like a memento. But yeah, going out to like Redmond, Oregon, like right at the edge of the desert, like there's this cool little like festival where people made like vehicles of all sorts of things, all shapes and sizes. The idea is you have to make them and they have to cost less than $500. So we were out there like, in the middle of the summer, out in the desert doing a gig. Like all these people with this like sort of Mad Max aesthetic going on. That was pretty fucking metal. Like and people loved it. They were having a fun time, a few mosh pits even started on the stand. It was great.
Wow, that sounds like a
Like,
lot of
yeah,
yeah,
fun.
oh yeah,
How about you,
it
yeah.
was
The
Tom?
Gamma
it was
500 show.
incredible.
What's Yeah, the Gamma 500 show was pretty memorable for me as well because there was a wedding that actually happened right before we on the stage that happened right before we played, and I remember just kind of like hanging out with the guys, just as the sun was starting to go down, and then we engaged into our set, and that was definitely played those one of the more memorable shows, and then as we started playing, all these you know cars, rigs start coming in, and you see the headlights come in, and they're like driving in like circles, kind of like a mosh pit of cars, as we
Yeah.
are like crashing it
Yeah,
up.
I love that
and then I
description, a
and
mosh
then
pit of
also
cars.
of
yeah,
course, but luckily
kind
they
of
didn't
like
collide.
bumper cars but with
Well,
like metal.
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
When are you guys thinking that the new album will be out?
that I'm not,
Probably we'll be
not
releasing.
sure.
Oh, we'll be releasing the a couple singles here. Just kind of undergoing the mastering process at this point. So we'll probably start off releasing Endless Floor and we also have like a little music video we recorded for that one.
Oh, sick.
That we'll be putting out. Yeah, yeah. We recorded in front of the Fort Vancouver here in National Historical Site. The bulk of it, and then yeah, so that will be probably coming out sometime probably later this month or maybe early June,
Mhm.
and then the full album will probably be coming out around July.
Oh yeah, we recorded some footage for
But
that
I mean,
too. It was pretty cool. At that fort, we had like Watson help us out. He's always a good help too.
Yeah.
He also played bass before Zach got here
oh yeah,
too. But yeah,
Yeah.
he's been an immense help with us. He's also been helping promote us too. In fact, I walked just earlier today, and I actually saw a flyer of one of our coming shows coming up this Monday. Like just walking in, going,
yeah,
"Oh, I know those guys. I've heard of them before."
Yeah, he's actually the guitar player in my band now. And
Oh hell yeah.
Watson's a really good dude. Yeah, I really appreciate him.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Fun fact, I've actually known about Watson since middle school. Both of us used to go to Da Vinci Arts Middle School.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, he was in the 7th, I was in the 8th. We were in like the same math class or something. I can't quite remember, but yeah.
Any shows coming up in the near term or long term that you
we have
want
a
to
show on
promote?
Monday.
Yeah.
We have a show Monday with Striker and Silver Talon, which Silver Talon is probably like one of the best bands in Portland right now. I think it's like this is a very good show for us because it's probably the best of Portland's metal, and Striker, which has been they're always great. They're from Canada actually, and they're on tour. So that's gonna be a pretty memorable show for us. And then we're doing like the Washington Death Fest in July, and then we have a Salem Armory event in September at the Armory, kind of a historical venue where like Megadeth and Children of Bodom, I think that they're the last ones to play there, Nevermore, and so we're actually the first. These bands are actually the first bands to get to play on that stage since then. So that should be pretty cool, just to play there. And we'll probably be working on doing like some touring here to support this new album. We might do like a West Coast run down to LA and San Francisco, and then cut over through Colorado. So we're kind of looking to expand ourselves as a traveling band, if you will.
All right, sick. So the band is Atomic Terror. Their new album, Cloak of Deception, will hopefully be out in July. And this is going to end the recording. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.